With older stars like LeBron, Steph Curry, and KD nearing the end of their careers, we're starting to see the rise of younger stars ready to take the reins and build their legacy. And because of that, when you think of the top 10 players in the NBA today, you'll see a mixture of older and newer stars. But in 5 years, when older stars are in reduced roles, those top 10 lists are going to look drastically different. So today, we're going to go through and predict the top 10 NBA players in 5 years. And as a note of clarification, this list is not going to be based purely on an individual player's talent. Instead, we're going to predict each player's individual success, like All-Star, All-NBA, or MVP awards, and team success, like NBA titles and finals appearances, and combine that with the potential they show today to figure out where each player ranks. Also, this video is heavily inspired by a video made by 6 Rings of Steel a couple of weeks ago, so if you want to check that out after you watch this video, I'll leave the link down below in the description. And lastly, go ahead and leave a like and remember to subscribe if you want to see more NBA videos just like this one. So without further ado, let's get started. So at the number 10 position for the 2028-2029 season, I have Joel Embiid. Based on overall talent, there aren't many better than the 76ers superstar center. But I have a couple of concerns for Embiid in the future, particularly his injury history. In his career, Embiid hasn't played more than 68 games in a season. And with players now having to play more than 65 games to qualify for end of the year awards, I don't know how many more accolades Embiid is going to take home. And then you get to the playoff success, or the lack thereof at this point of his career. If Embiid couldn't get the job done with multiple All-NBA players on his squad, I just don't know how he's going to fare playing against the mighty Celtics, whose top 2 will be in their prime in 2029, or against up-and-coming teams like the Cavaliers or Magic. What will keep Embiid in top 10 conversations is his overall talent. He may slow down just a little bit at 34 years old, but I don't see much of his game regressing to the point where he won't be one of the 5 most talented players in the league. And for that reason, Embiid gets the edge over players like John Morant and Donovan Mitchell, because despite my concerns for his future, his talent and impact on the court is almost irreplaceable. At the 9th slot, I have Paolo Banchero. Banchero has shown signs of greatness since entering the league as the first overall pick in the 2022 draft. And with the Magic improving dramatically since his arrival, the sky's the limit for the second-year star. In 2029, Banchero will be 26 years old, just entering his prime, and with his performance improving every passing day, he has serious potential to be one of the best players in the league. As a player, Banchero has evolved his playmaking and defensive abilities already, and while the shooting efficiency isn't quite there yet, I'm extremely confident it will be within the next couple of seasons. And what makes me feel even more confident about this pick is that his team is going to grow with Banchero, and by the time 2029 comes around, the Magic will have had years of playoff experience, and Banchero will have had his opportunities to prove that he's a great playoff performer. However, as a whole, it's hard for me to say where Banchero will be in 5 years, and he only sits at the 9th slot because I just don't know where more established stars today are going to be. But with his ability as a scorer and leader, combined with his team showing signs of being a potential playoff contender in the upcoming years, don't be surprised if Banchero is even higher on this list in 2029. At number 8, I have Devin Booker. Booker was one of the easier players to project on this list because he's already one of the best scorers in the league at just 27 years old. And even if you were to have concerns about Booker at 32 years old, his play style is going to easily transition as he gets older, because he doesn't rely on athleticism to get his buckets. Booker has already proven himself in big moments, being the best player on a finals runner-up back in 2021. And with the Suns continuing to surround Booker with talent in Durant and Beal, the Suns could easily find themselves back in the conference finals position in the next 2 seasons, assuming that their team stays healthy. But what makes me hesitant to put Booker any higher than 8th is that I think Booker has reached his max ceiling, and if he hasn't, then there's not much more for him to offer as a basketball player. And while his peak is being one of the 10 best players in the league, he doesn't carry the potential as a player, and his team doesn't have the long-term future one would hope for a player as talented as Booker. Because of that, if the Suns can't make any noise in the playoffs in the next couple of seasons, Booker will have to adjust to a life in Phoenix with new co-stars, and likely fall to teams like the Thunder, who have homegrown talent that will just be entering their prime in 2029. Again, as a talent, Booker will certainly be a top player in the league in 5 years. But I can't put him any higher because while he's a great player today, there's likely not much more potential for Booker to reach. At the number 7 spot, I have Jason Tatum. Tatum gets the edge over Booker solely because the Boston Celtics have one of the best cores in the NBA, and only one, maybe two of their incredible starting five will be off the team in 2029. Tatum, like Booker, has a game that will easily translate as he enters the later years of his career. And even then, Tatum will only be 31 in 2029. And if he can keep up at this pace for the next 5 seasons, Tatum is going to have 5 All-Star appearances, 5 All-NBA appearances, maybe even an MVP, or at the least a couple top 5 finishes in MVP voting, and one of the best shots on this list to win a title. Just accolade-wise, Tatum has the potential to finish with the most awards out of anyone on this list. But talent-wise, Tatum has probably already reached his peak statistically speaking, but even then, there's nothing wrong with what he provides today, which is 70 to 75 games of consistently great performances. Tatum is probably one of the safest bets to be a top 10 player in 2029, but because his ceiling isn't as high as almost every other player on this list, I'm going to play it safe and slide him at the number 7 spot. And coming in at number 6, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis is one of the harder players to project on this list because in 2029 he will be 34 years old, and with his playstyle relying on his physicality, it'll be interesting to see how he operates after playing as he does for 10 plus seasons. But if Giannis can be even 90% of what he is today, he's still going to be a 27 point per game scorer with elite defense. And if he keeps that up for the next 5 seasons, that's 5 first team All-NBA appearances, 5 top 5 MVP finishes, and likely some deep playoff runs. But what keeps Giannis outside the top 5 for me is his team situation. We all have seen the slight regression of Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, and Brook Lopez this season. And in 5 years, the odds are that at best, one of those guys are still on the team. Milwaukee is going to need to find some new players who can complement Giannis as they did in their 2021 title run. But guys like Middleton and Jrue Holiday don't just grow on trees. And even with those guys, the last few seasons for the Bucks have been disappointing. You'd have to wonder, if Giannis doesn't win another title by 2029, will his stock as a player go down? It's questions like these that make me hesitant to put the Greek Freak higher on this list. So for that reason, Giannis slides in at the 6th spot. At number 5, I have Victor Wembanyama. We've now reached the point in this list where every player from now on could easily be the best player in the league in 2029. And while Victor sits at number 5, he might have the best odds to take that top spot. The reason why is pretty self-explanatory, and if you want to hear me talk about why Wemby is so good, go ahead and watch my last video. But instead of gassing up Vic for another minute, let's go over the reasons why I have him at number 5. For starters, I don't have as much confidence for the Spurs making a run compared to any of the other teams in the playoffs for the next 5 seasons. That's of course not saying the Spurs can't surround him with the necessary talent to win some games. But with top teams like the Timberwolves and Thunder, and rising teams in the Spurs division like the Rockets and Pelicans, San Antonio is going to have a tough path to making a deep playoff run in the next 5 years. But aside from the potential lack of playoff success, what slides him only into the 5th slot is the fact that he's only going to be 25 years old in 2029, compared to the top guys on this list, who will either be in the middle of their prime or just exiting it. And while Wemby will obviously be a great scorer and likely the best defender in the league at that point, he'll probably not be at the peak of his powers. If I did a list of the top 10 players in 7 to 8 years, I'm sure Victor would be first. But because he's likely still going to have just a little bit more to figure out at 25 years old, I'm slotting him at number 5 on this list. At number 4, I have Anthony Edwards. Edwards is one of the most special players we've seen in a while, as he plays in the mold of legends from the 90s and 2000s, yet puts his own special spin on every move he makes, which creates special highlights almost once a week. But beyond the viral moments, Edwards in 2024 is playing incredibly as a 22-year-old All-Star, putting up a 26-5-5 along with great defense. And his efforts have caused the Timberwolves to go from a team that missed the playoffs last season to a team that's now fighting for the top seed in the West. And as great as Edwards is now, he still shows he has another level to reach. And by 2029, where Edwards will be 27, I'd bet that Edwards is in the conversation to be the best player in the league. And with a great supporting cast and coaches surrounding him, the individual success will likely be met with playoff success in the future. With all of that into consideration, what also props Edwards up is his marketability to the casual fan. As I said earlier, Edwards has the ability to create a ridiculous highlight and use his personality in interviews and through social media to raise his popularity. And as much as we hate to admit it, popularity goes a long way towards how fans view you as a player. And while I don't take that into account for ranking these players, in 5 years, others will. So I'm saying this now. Don't be surprised if Edwards becomes the face of the NBA once LeBron and Curry retire. Coming in at number 3, I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai has taken the NBA world by storm this season, leading the Thunder to a top seed in the West with his consistently elite play. Shai is currently in a struggle with Nikola Jokic over who is going to win the MVP award, and I see no reason why Shai won't be in these conversations for the next 5 seasons. He has all the tools necessary to be an all-time great, and what's going to help him even more in these conversations are his team. We all know how talented the Thunder are at such a young age, and if they can retain their core pieces, it's going to be tough for any team in the West to beat them as they all reach their prime. And with Shai as a leader of the pack, the Thunder could easily win an NBA title by the time 2029 rolls around. As a player though, Shai has what would be best described as aura. He hits the big time shots, he gets the stops on defense, and he rarely makes mistakes on the basketball court. This aura, like with Edwards' personality, is likely going to boost him up in player rankings in others' eyes. And if he keeps up this level of play, there's no reason why Shai can't grab the top spot on this list in 5 years. At the number 2 position, I have Luka Doncic. I struggled between picking Luka and the guy who took the number 1 spot on this list, but I ultimately decided Doncic would stay at the number 2 spot because I just don't know what the Mavericks are going to look like in 5 years. As I've talked about in detail, when we rank players, we look at a number of things, but one that almost always is a determining factor is playoff success. And while Luka is one of the best playoff performers in the league, I just don't see the current core Luka has around him elevating the Mavericks to a title, especially considering how strong the rest of the NBA has become. And with a lack of first-round picks for the next 5 years, combined with some concerns I have with how the Mavericks can perform defensively with the Luka and Kyrie backcourt, the Mavericks may not find serious team success unless they decide to completely rebuild. But even now in player rankings, you can't deny the talent that Luka possesses, so much so that he's already a top 6 player in the league despite his team sitting in the middle of the pack. You could absolutely make the argument that Luka is and will be the most talented player in the league in 5 years, and honestly, I probably wouldn't disagree with you. His stats, both baseline and advanced, are absolutely ridiculous, and his efforts on the court have completely elevated the Mavericks to contending status despite not having the best roster around him. You could absolutely make the argument that Luka deserves a top spot on this list, but for now, I have him at the number 2 spot. But at number 1, I have Nikola Jokic. Now this feels like a risky pick putting Jokic at the top spot, because by the time 2029 rolls around, Jokic will be 34 years old. And as we all know, Jokic is not going to be the type of guy to stick around longer than he needs to. So as crazy as it may sound, we may see Jokic already retired by then. But the odds are that he won't be, and if Jokic is still around, he's a guaranteed 45 wins and a walking triple-double. He's still going to control the offense in a way we've never seen before. And as long as his supporting core in Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, and Michael Porter Jr. are healthy and still effective basketball players, the Nuggets will always be in the race to win an NBA title. And that's all without mentioning that Jokic has arguably the most impressive stats in the league. And while he's going to be 34 in 2029, he will be a top 3 player in MVP voting for as long as he plays. As much as I was tempted to put the previous 4 guys ahead of Jokic, I don't think the reign of Jokic is going anywhere unless he decides to call it quits early. But what do you think? Comment below who you think will be the best player in the league in 5 years, and remember to like and subscribe to watch more NBA videos just like this one. I'm Julian with TalkBackSports, and I'll see you next time.